And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, members of these two subcommittees. My name is Dr. Bill Greene. I am a citizen lobbyist. That is, I don't represent any particular group, but I stand before you as a citizen of the sovereign state of Georgia. I am also an instructor at Gainesville State College, where I teach American government and Georgia government. This past year, I was teaching on Article 1 of the United States Constitution, and a student asked me a very pertinent and perceptive question. Specifically, we were looking at Article 1, Section 10, which states, again, no state shall make anything but gold and silver coin in payment and tender of debt. As I define the term tender for my students, that is, an offer of money or service in payment of an obligation, a student raised his hand and asked this question. He said, when was the Constitution amended so the states would no longer be required to use only gold and silver coins for paying out or receiving in payment of an obligation? And I had to give him an honest answer. I had to tell him that the Constitution was never amended to change that requirement for the states. So his next question was obvious. He asked, then how many states currently use only gold or silver coins as tender in payment of debts? And my answer had to be just as obvious. I told him none. Every single state, including ours, does make some other thing besides gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts, something called Federal Reserve notes. And you can imagine what a classroom conversation went after this point. Not one student could understand how the state of Georgia could be in direct violation of the U.S. Constitution and get away with it. And I realized that I couldn't understand it either. So I researched the issue extensively, and I found that, as I thought, every single state in our republic was in direct violation of Article 1, Section 10. Without ever amending the Constitution, we had abandoned our constitutional duty to use only gold and silver coins in payment. That's why I actually sat down and wrote the initial draft of this bill, entitled it the Constitutional Tender Act. It's a very simple bill, as you've seen. It's only 4 pages long. But that's because this isn't something complicated to understand. All we need to know is this. First, the U.S. Constitution requires that the state of Georgia use only gold and silver coins as tender in payment of debt. Second, state legislators have all sworn an oath to uphold that Constitution. And so therefore, ethically and morally, our state legislators need to do whatever the Constitution requires, which in this case means our legislature needs to pass an act returning Georgia to adherence to the U.S. Constitution in this area. After I wrote this first draft, I approached a number of state legislators, including some of you sitting here today, asking if they would introduce the bill in the Georgia House of Representatives. And surprisingly, to me at least, none would for various reasons. So I was very thankful when I approached Bobby Franklin, and he was willing to help rewrite the whole bill and to introduce it and to carry it forward in this session of the legislature. And for that, I thank you, Representative Franklin. He has been an incredible help, and his knowledge of the issue has contributed greatly to what this bill, how it has changed. So now, even though this is a relatively simple bill, I'm sure you as our duly elected representatives have a lot of questions, as we've been seeing, about the implications and the mechanics of how the state of Georgia would return to the form of legal tender that's required by the U.S. Constitution. So it's for that reason that I emailed each of you a frequently asked question, FAQ document that I hope you all received. I believe Representative Franklin also distributed to all of you today. I would ask you to read through that document if you haven't already. It should answer most of your preliminary questions, at least regarding HB 430, which ought to help speed up the process even of this particular hearing. Then as you continue to ask questions during this hearing, I would ask you to please begin each question with this phrase. Since the U.S. Constitution requires every state to only use gold and silver coins in payments to and by the state, then blank. And then just fill in the blank with your question. I know that sounds a little funny, but to be honest, I find that this usually causes the person asking the question to phrase it a little bit differently. You see, the issue here is not about whether to do this. The issue, the point is to come up with the best way to do this, since we are required to do this. Obviously, there are a number of good benefits to having our state returning to using constitutional tender. It would immediately begin the flow of real wealth towards our state's treasury. It would stabilize Georgia's economy, protect the pensions of state employees, and offer many other immediately recognizable benefits. But in simply reading the plain language of the U.S. Constitution, and in light of the economic disaster that the Federal Reserve System has brought about, it should be plain to see that the state of Georgia is violating the basic law of the land. And if the state would go back to obeying the Constitution in this one matter, it would likely lead to an eventual reversal of that economic disaster. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am happy to answer whatever questions I am able to throughout this hearing today. Afterwards, you can call me, email me, you have my email address, but I would like to close my statement with this. You are duty-bound, you are honor-bound by your oath before God to uphold and support the United States Constitution. Can you imagine if the state of Georgia denied or abridged the right of some of its citizens to vote? Of course you can't, because the 15th Amendment of the United States Constitution forbids it. Can you imagine if Governor Perdue signed a treaty with a foreign nation? Of course you can't, because Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution forbids it. Can you imagine if the Georgia Treasury Office began coining its own Georgia money or began printing its own Georgia dollars, that is bills of credit? Of course you can't, because Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution forbids it. So, can you imagine if the state of Georgia made anything besides gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts by and to the state? You should not be able to imagine that, because Article 1, Section 10 of the United States Constitution forbids it. I thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, Mr. Greene. We're going to be taking too many questions, but I do know that Representative Weldon did have a question. I do. And we'll do a couple questions before we can continue on if they're pertinent. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll try to be brief. Since the U.S. Constitution requires every state to only use gold and silver coins of payment to and by the state, then can you tell me the value of this Federal Reserve note was printed by the United States of America, and it states on the face of this, it says, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. Can you tell me what the value of this is?
The value of it is whatever the people in the marketplace assign to it. The more that those dollars are pumped into the economy, the more the value goes down. So if you're looking in comparison to the dollar in, say, 1913, that dollar is worth about 4 cents right now. If you look at it in comparison to an ounce of silver, then that dollar right there can maybe buy you, a pack of sugar, whereas that silver that says $1 on it, that's legal tender from the United States Mint, that dollar can probably buy you a couple of Starbucks cups of coffee, in terms of its actual value.
And would you agree that this is a Federal Reserve note?
It is. It's not a United States. You mentioned that it was printed by the United States government. It's not. It's printed by the Federal Reserve Board.
Okay, printed by the Federal Reserve. And this is stamped on here. It says this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private.
Yeah.
Does that have force of law?
It is a law passed by the United States government, but the United States government, of course, is under the U.S. Constitution.
And that has force of law, correct?
It has the force of law unless it's unconstitutional.
Has it been found to be unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court?
Not yet.
Or any other appeals court?
Not yet.
Thank you. No further.
Absolutely. And if I could answer a little bit further on that, neither has there been, of course, any court that has said that it is Article 1, Section 10 has been found to be overturned or amended in any way.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Greene. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
your comment.